Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Wes Moore, your instructor for Macroeconomics. I hope that you've had a great week and looking forward to this session with you, session 7 on culture and productivity. So let's take a look now and see what we want to talk about today. There are 3 things that we want to cover in this session. The first is, what is productivity? I want to give you a brief overview of the idea and the concept of productivity. And then secondly, I want to talk to you about trustworthiness and productivity. And then finally, we want to discuss social capital and productivity. These last 2 things are not discussed very often in the context of productivity, but I think in our culture they are increasingly more important. So let's get started then with what is productivity. Productivity. Well, let's begin with production. What is production? Production is that part of business when we take the resources that we have and we convert them into goods and services. We have input, we change them, and we produce output. That is production. Well, productivity basically is how good we are at doing that. How much output do we get from a certain amount of input? Labor and capital inputs, what do we get out of them? And the more we can get out of what we put in, the greater our productivity will be. Labor productivity is an important calculation of productivity, and it has to do with how much you get out of your labor. For 1 worker hour or 1 worker day, how much product do you get out of those workers? Very important concept, and we'll come back to that a little bit later in the discussion. Well, you might ask, who cares about productivity? What's the big deal? Well, the reason it's important in economics, in business, economics, economies, is because the more you produce, the more you can sell. And the more you can sell, the more you can make. And the more income you make, the better lives everyone can lead. So if we can take a certain amount of our resources and produce X with it, and then turn around the next year and produce X plus 5, then we have the same amount of resources going in, but we have greater productivity coming out, and that means we're all able to make more money. The company's able to make more money, and eventually the workers are able to make more money, have more money to spend, and have better lives. So goal number 1 in economics is to increase productivity, to make it greater than it was before. The McEachern textbook discusses ways to increase productivity, and he outlines 3 of those. The first thing he says that you can improve the amount and quality of your resources. So you can have better labor or better capital. So you can have better workers. Again, we want to touch on that when we get to our sections on culture and trustworthiness and the social impact of productivity. Or you can have better capital, better machines, better equipment. You can also have better technology and better know-how. In other words, you can just know how to do it differently to get more out of what you started with than you were able to in the past, so you can work smarter. And then thirdly, you can improve the rules of the game. And the rules of the game have to do with the laws and the cultural issues that are involved in productivity. For example, if you're in a third world country where the laws are concerned, the government can pass more laws to protect private property or intellectual property, or the government could do a better job through the legal system of enforcing contracts. That's an example of laws. But what we want to do now in the remaining portions of this session is we want to talk about the rules of the game, and we want to focus specifically on the cultural issues. Improving quality of resources, better tech, that's the stuff that everybody talks about. But let's get into this rules of the game issue, and let's talk about the cultural side of productivity and how we may in the United States be going in the wrong direction. So let's move on from a basic understanding of productivity, and let's talk about trustworthiness and productivity. Trustworthiness and productivity. What does trustworthiness mean? It means you can trust someone, right? You can trust your workers. Well, there is a relationship between the trustworthiness of your workers and the amount of production that you get out of those workers. In the McEachern textbook, he says this: recent research finds that economies grow faster if people are more trusting and more trustworthy. So what is the relationship between trustworthiness and productivity? Let's take a look at this. Remember, the first way that we can improve productivity is to improve the amount and quality of our resources, which will be capital or labor. But let's just focus in on labor here. And let's look at trustworthiness from the standpoint of improving the quality of the labor that we have. Can we agree that a quality laborer has a few characteristics? Do you think this characterizes a quality laborer or worker? A quality laborer shows up on time. That would mean a trustworthy worker, wouldn't it? A quality or trustworthy worker works hard for his or her full shift even when no one is looking. They give it all. They're in it for more than just what others think of them. They're trying to do a good job and fill those 8 hours of work with real work. Can we agree? That sounds like a pretty good worker, doesn't it? A quality laborer also carries out their responsibilities faithfully. They are an extension of the management or the ownership of the company. They are faithful in what they do. They do what they are told and are responsible to do. And then finally, a quality laborer is someone who can be trusted with the company's money and with the company's equipment. Can't we say then that those are qualities of a good laborer, a quality laborer? All right, well, given that fact, what does this kind of a laborer, the picture represented here by this lady got her feet kicked up and her arms stretched out at the office, what does she represent in terms of a quality laborer? Is this a person who is going to produce a lot for you? No, this is what I call the whatever you can get by with worker. The whatever you can get by with worker. This worker doesn't really worry about showing up on time. If nobody else is at the office, this person will show up late. If nobody else is looking, this worker will not do a whole lot of work. This worker doesn't really care about the responsibilities of his or her office. All they care about is what's easiest for them and what they can get by with. And this laborer does not care about the company's money or equipment. They will steal it or abuse it if they have to in order to promote themselves and make things better for themselves. So this is what we have, I think, more and more of in the United States. We have a whatever you can get by with culture, and that has fallen in line with the workers that we have in our companies, and I'm seeing more and more of it in my own business efforts. I work with a lot of contractors in the work that I do, and they have a lot of laborers that they send out on job sites in their work vans. And I cannot tell you the number of times I have had them tell me that they fired people because they would find them sitting in the van sleeping during the day when the job was supposed to be getting done. They know that there's a GPS in the truck, so they take the truck to the job site and they sit at the job site for 8 hours and they do nothing. What does that do to productivity? What does that do to the entire economy? There's a couple of articles I want to mention to you here. One appeared in the New York Post, and this is an article about how much time employees spend slacking off. It's by a guy named Gregory Brisiger. This is how much time employees spend slacking off, and this is what he says. All in all, the average employee could be wasting more than 8 hours per work week on activities unrelated to the job, such as answering personal email. If these numbers were true for every full-time worker in the U.S., that would add up to $15.5 billion in lost productivity every week. You see, people are getting less and less trustworthy. I also see this when I am teaching. Every semester, without fail, there'll be one or two students in every class that will copy their work directly from the internet and turn it into me as if I'm not going to see what it is and recognize what it is. They're whatever they can get by with people, and they bring that to the college classroom. Now, what kind of people do you think those men and women are going to be when they become workers somewhere? They're going to be whatever they can get by with workers, whatever they can get by with citizens. That's not the kind of person you want to be, my friends. You don't want to be that way. You don't want to be that kind of a worker or a student. If you do it in my class, I'll fail you. So remember that. There's another article by CNBC called "This Crime in the Workplace is Costing U.S. Businesses $50 billion a Year." And this is what the author said. Matt Ham has had 2 run-ins with thefts by employees at his small business, Computer Repair Doctor. At one store, 2 employees were caught stealing parts from inventory and skimming cash. Then an employee misused the company's Amazon Services account by changing it to his personal account. A new study by Hiscox, a global specialist insurer, found that U.S. businesses affected by employee theft lost an average of $1.13 million in 2016, $50 billion per year in total. So people are not only slacking off at work and checking their phones and playing on their phones and checking the emails, but they're also stealing from their employers. And notice it says here that the average small business that was affected by theft lost over $1 million. Yes, what does that do to productivity? Let's talk about another quote from the Macroeconomics textbook that's related. We're going to keep building on this. He says, shops in countries plagued by suicide bombers must hire security guards to deter such horror, and this increases the cost of doing business. Now, in the United States, of course, we don't have suicide bombers, thank God, and hopefully we never will. But I want you to notice the connection here between what's happening in the society, which is suicide bombers in this case, to the need for security, and then the increased cost of doing business. Now, let's go back to our previous example of people stealing. What do businesses have to do to prevent stealing, and what does that have to do with productivity? An Entrepreneur magazine article called 6 Tips to Reduce Employee Theft suggested a number of ways that businesses could reduce theft in their organizations. The first was to have 2 employees open and close, so there's never just one person there that can steal from you. And then they recommended that the business owners monitor the trash removal, because they said employees will put merchandise in the trash, take out the trash, and then steal from the trash. And then finally, the magazine recommended that you add a security system. They had other recommendations, but these are the 3 that I want you to focus on here. So let's look at productivity. What does having 2 employees there all the time do to productivity? Number one, it increases cost, doesn't it? Because now I have to pay 2 employees than 1, but it also cuts my productivity in half, because the job that 1 person should be able to do, now I have to pay 2 people to do. You see how trustworthiness decreases productivity and also increases my costs. So what happens if I have to monitor trash removal? Well, it increases my cost, doesn't it? I have to pay someone to do that. And that cuts productivity, because instead of that person being able to do work that I can sell, producing goods and services that I can sell, they are overhead because they are now doing something that doesn't produce any value to the organization other than keeping people from stealing. And then finally, in adding a security system, what does that do? That increases my costs. And that takes money out of my business to buy new capital, put new equipment in, or to hire more laborers and help increase my productivity. So you can see here that the way America is going in terms of the trustworthiness of our people is really going to affect our productivity. Don't be one of these people. Finally, let's talk about social capital and productivity. In the Macroeconomics textbook, he also says this. He says, at the national level, social capital could be reflected in a sense of common purpose. For example, polls show that Americans remain amongst the most patriotic people in the world. In a 2010 survey, 83% said they were extremely or very proud to be Americans. So what is he doing here? He's connecting the idea that productivity in America is high because people love being Americans. They feel like they're part of something being an American, that they're doing something good by being an American, and it's worth the effort to be productive and a good citizen and a good worker in the nation. But there's another article that appeared in 2019 by Megan Brennan from the Gallup organization. They do a lot of polling. And she noticed this and that. I looked this up. I looked up the same study, this 2010 survey, as a Gallup poll. And here's what she put. Yes, in 2010, they were extremely proud or very proud. There were 83% of people that fell into that category. But by 2019, the extremely and very proud to be an American percentage was down to 70%. And then on just the issue of being extremely proud, 58% were that way in 2010, but only 45% were that way in 2019. And this fall in valuing the United States of America and appreciating the nation in which we live is going to add to our decreases in productivity. The growing dislike of our country by its own citizens causes these same citizens to do what we've already discussed: steal, slack off, take advantage of their organizations and the government, commit violent acts. Whatever problems we have, we are the greatest land of opportunity on earth. How many students watching this video received grant money or free tuition from the United States government? How many are free to do what they want with their time, to follow and pursue their dreams at their own pace, according to their own will? Are there people who don't like you because of your skin color or your wealth or the part of town you're from or the way your accent sounds? Sure there are. But that kind of prejudice exists in every nation, and in much greater degrees than you will ever face here in America. That is why people line up to get into our nation. People do not line up to get into Saudi Arabia or the violent nations that are in Africa, for example. They are willing even to come into our nation illegally, to risk their own lives, because this nation is so great and so full of opportunity. You cannot allow obstacles to stop you. Race, social status, handicap, family background, or otherwise. Everyone has a reason to fail. You must see what a great favor it is for you to be born here. And instead of listening to the voices calling for you to hate your country, you should be thankful. And instead of being slowed down by what you don't have, be motivated by what you can have. Because you are an American, and you live in the greatest nation this world has ever seen or will ever see. Don't be ashamed of your nation. Be proud to be in this great land of opportunity. Well, that concludes session 7. Again, I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have enjoyed sharing it with you, and I wish you the very best until we have our next session. Have a great week.